This will be hard to deal with. What you're going to face is a fact that goes against everything you've been taught to believe. Since you were a child, you've been told that you have to defend yourself when someone accuses you, that you have to explain why you did what you did when someone asks you, that you need to fight back with words, explanations, and arguments when someone challenges you. But what if this very reflex, the strong need to protect yourself, is the hidden chain that keeps you weak? What if you lose more power than you think every time you rush to prove your innocence? People who knew how to stay quiet, hold back, and not explain themselves have always had a place in history. Niccolo Machiavelli said that perception is stronger than fact. Once you realize this, the idea of defending yourself starts to look like a trap, because in the court of public opinion, defending almost never helps you, it hurts you. When you explain yourself, it means that the accusation is true, and in a society where perception, not fact, rules, that inference is lethal. This is a strange paradox. The innocent man who tries to explain himself looks guilty, while the guilty man who won't explain anything looks untouchable. Why? Power is not based on truth, it is based on stories. And the person who doesn't follow the laws of defense takes the higher ground. This is not how you were trained to think. Schools, jobs, and even families teach you how to explain. Why were you late? Why did you say that? Why didn't you do what you were told? You have been trained to answer, kowtow, and justify since you could talk. You think you're cleaning your name, but you're really giving up your power. You are saying to the world, you are the judge. I am the one being accused. And once you step into that courtroom, even if it's only in someone's head, you've already lost. But here's the problem that should bother you. When you stop defending yourself, you don't lose respect, you gain it. People don't think you're weak when you refuse to explain. They think you're dangerous. People lean in. They are curious. They don't believe what they say. Fear comes from silence, not protection. Not explaining things creates mystery. Why don't the most powerful people explain themselves very often? Kings, generals, leaders, and even the sly people who change history all had one thing in common. They never defended, never justified, and never bowed. You give up your power as soon as you explain and sit in the chair of the accused. But are you ready to admit how deep this goes? Think about how awkward it is to be quiet when someone asks you a question. When someone criticizes you, think about how quickly you try to prove them wrong. You think you're protecting your good name. You're really losing power. And here comes the big question that you need to think about. If defending yourself is weak and not defending yourself is strong, then why do you still feel like you need to explain? Why does silence scare you more than being accused? Why does not answering seem more risky than answering? This is the contradiction that Machiavelli knew about and used. He knew that in politics, combat, and life, the person who doesn't give in to the urge to defend instantaneously switches the power, because the world wants you to beg. The whole system of control falls apart when you say no. But this isn't just about the plan. This is about who you are. If you can't sit still when someone accuses you, who is in charge of you? Your accuser or you? If every criticism makes you defend yourself, then your feelings are not your own. Your reputation doesn't belong to you. You need other people's approval to feel good about yourself. So, before we go any farther, ask yourself, how many times have you had to explain your plans to folks who didn't need to know? How many times have you bowed your head, not because you were incorrect, but because you were afraid of what others might think? How many times have you made yourself weaker by talking when your detractors would have been scared if you had been quiet? The answer to this conundrum isn't easy. It will make you rethink how you live. But as soon as you get it, you'll know why people who explain are forgotten and people who don't explain are regarded as untouchable. This has nothing to do with being arrogant. It's not about being careless. You don't play by the rules of defense anymore because the power axis has changed so much. But before you can take that power, you need to know why you are stuck in this cycle of explanation. Where does this need to defend come from? Why is it so deeply ingrained in your mind that you mistake it for morality, even for survival? We need to go there next, to the roots, to the hidden powers in the mind and in society that keep you enslaved to defense, justification, and weakness. You can only really stop when you know why you protect, and you can only become dangerous when you cease protecting. Why do you protect yourself? Why do you hurry to explain when no one asked? Why do you feel like you have to explain your decisions, actions, and even your own life, as if the world is a court and you are always on trial? This reflex is not something that happens on its own. It is learned. You weren't born knowing how to defend yourself. When you were a kid, before you could talk, you sobbed when you were hungry, grasped for what you wanted, and lived without shame. But little by little, the world gave you the sickness of justification. Parents wanted answers, instructors wanted justifications, and society wanted proof. And with each answer, you learned the lie that other people had to prove your worth, that your truth isn't enough until they question it. Carl Jung once remarked, "The best thing you can do for yourself is to become who you really are." The issue is that if you are always defending, you are never really there. You are merely what other people want you to be. You don't live in your own reality. You live in the changing views of the people around you. You are a defendant in a trial that never ends. Nietzsche said that this sickness was a sign of the weak herd. People who are afraid of being judged, want to fit in, and can't handle the weight of their own will. He said that the one who gives in to the group's need for justification is hurting themselves. You give up some of your sovereignty every time you explain something or defend yourself. And yet, why is this so firmly rooted? Psychology provides one explanation: fear of exclusion. The human brain is set up to help people live in groups. Being booted out meant death. So, after thousands of years of development, we learned to show our loyalty, explain ourselves, and ask for forgiveness when we were accused. You have a survival instinct that used to defend you, but now keeps you in chains. You are not saving your life when you explain yourself. You are betraying it. Machiavelli knew about this inclination and flipped it on its head. In The Prince, he showed that power is how others see things, and that perception doesn't change for the person who defends it, but for the person who controls the story. To defend means to agree with what the accused says. Not saying anything will kill it. This is why leaders who wouldn't explain things seemed like gods who couldn't be touched. Because silence puts the burden of proof back on the person making the accusation, placing them in a tough spot. But the roots of this need go far deeper, into the mind itself. Jung talked about the shadow, which is the part of ourselves that we hide and deny. A lot of the time, defending oneself isn't about the truth. It's about keeping your weak self-image from being seen. When someone accuses you, your first instinct is to justify yourself. But this is not to clear up the truth. It's to protect the mask you wear. You protect because you are afraid that your illusion will fall apart. But what happens when you stop defending? The mask breaks, the illusion breaks, and what is left is something scary but freeing. The raw presence of a person that doesn't want to be accepted, a self that exists on its own. That's why people are afraid of silence. Not because it makes them look guilty, but because it makes them genuine. But most individuals can't handle this weight. They like being secure in defense, always having to explain themselves, and changing themselves to fit what others want. It is simpler to talk about than to deal with quiet. It's simpler to give in than to stay strong. This is why the cycle goes on, from one generation to the next, and from one culture to the next. It teaches us that defense is survival, but in reality, it is submission. So the trouble is that you act like you're guilty, even when you're not. You behave like the world has the right to ask you questions, and you have to answer them. You give up your freedom because you're scared of being found guilty. But here's the sad twist. Your excuses never work. They only make people think you can't control yourself. Accusations have force, not because they are true, but because you react. And once you react, you're stuck. You willfully jump into the psychological cage, thinking you are protecting yourself when you are really putting yourself in jail. Nietzsche warned of this when he talked about slave morality, which is the morality of people who bow, justify, and ask for forgiveness instead of standing up for what they believe in. Machiavelli turned quiet into a weapon and a strategy for kings, and Jung showed that it was a shadow that lived inside everyone and wanted to be liked. It's evident where the roots are now. It's not noble to want to protect yourself. It isn't strength. It's the echo of an old survival instinct, the ability to govern society, and the terror of your own shadow. And until you realize this clearly, you will always be stuck in the world's courts, trying to explain yourself to people who don't deserve it. But once you see it, the question becomes too much to bear. What happens when you stop fighting? What happens when you break the loop and don't explain? Even when you're pushed, even when you're accused, even when silence feels like fire in your chest. That's where we need to go next. The effects we can't see. Into the unexpected and frightening change that happens when you stop following the rules of defense. You don't realize how much each defense costs you, not in terms of reputation, but in terms of power. Every explanation you give changes how others see you, changes how your own mind works, and strengthens the shackles of dependence that keep you bound in the cage of approval. You give up your power when you defend yourself. Authority is not based on truth, it is based on perception and the feeling of control. And the most important thing about defending yourself is that it shows you are not in charge, that someone else has made the frame and you have walked into it. At that moment, you are the accused, and the accused is never equal to the accuser, whether they are innocent or guilty. This is the hidden effect that most people don't understand. It's not the accusation that makes you less of a person, it's how you react to it. An insult without proof doesn't mean anything. But as soon as you rush to explain, you make it more important and real. The critic may not have any power, but your defense gives their remarks strength. You make them the judge of your character. And once they put on that crown, you can't take it off, even if you don't say anything. What causes this to happen? The human brain is not designed to find the truth. It is designed to find shortcuts. Cognitive biases are more than just facts. The confirmation bias makes people think that there must have been something to defend against when they hear a defense. The availability heuristic makes people remember the allegation better than your explanation. The negative bias also makes sure that doubt lasts longer than proof of innocence. This is why Machiavelli told leaders never to go into detail. He recognized that even a defense that is true can make others doubt. It's better to stay quiet and let your adversaries choke on their own words than to give them more power by talking to them. But the effects run considerably deeper into the very fabric of society. We live in a culture that is educated to want explanations. The media loves apologies, public displays of justification, confessions, and clarifications. Every time a leader, a famous person, or even a regular individual stands up for themselves, the audience gets stronger and hungrier. The same steps happen every time: accusation, anger, defense, and judgment. And in this never-ending loop, the person is always weaker than the group. When was the last time you saw someone stand up for themselves in public and come out stronger? They sealed their doom as soon as they explained. They were lessened, even if they were forgiven. Their power broke down. You will always be questioned if you admit that others have the right to do so. But quiet is a different thing. Silence is scary. Silence makes the crowd face its own doubts. When there is silence, the person who accused becomes the one who has to explain. And in that switch resides power. The paradoxical effect of not defending is that others may whisper, yet their whispers quickly disappear. But when you defend, their whispers will never go away. Because explanations don't get rid of mistrust, they make it last forever. There is another effect that goes deeper and changes who you are. Neuroscience demonstrates that the brain reorganizes itself in response to repetitive actions. When you keep defending yourself, you train your thinking to be submissive. You become very aware of criticism and quite sensitive to what other people think of you. You stop living for yourself and start living as a permanent defendant. But when you fight back and sit in the heat of accusation without moving, something big starts to happen. Your nervous system develops a new language, the language of freedom. You become more tolerant of those who don't like you. You don't need validation as much anymore. And a peculiar kind of freedom comes out, the freedom to not be touched. People in society don't want you to know this, because a person who doesn't protect is dangerous. You can't be controlled by shame, fear, or threats, and you can't be forced to confess. You are not part of the herd, and the herd is always afraid of what it can't control. But here is the tragic twist. Most individuals never get to enjoy this freedom. They are stuck in the cage of explanation until they die, sure that their next defense will save them. They don't see that every explanation is like another lock on the door. So the effects are really big and happen in 3 different ways. You give your adversaries strength and take away your own. You train your mind to always give in to you. You compromise your own sovereignty by living not as yourself, but as a mirror of how others see you. This is the quiet tragedy of living defensively. To live always justifying is to live never free. But what if you stopped the cycle? What if you said no? What if you let the fire of doubt burn and never said a word in your own defense? What change would happen? What kind of new power would come about? This is where the uprising starts, not in loud protests or endless arguments, but in the daring act of saying no, not willing to explain, not defending, not bowing. And that is where we must go next, to the rebellion itself. There, you will learn how to break free, turn the power structure upside down, and take back the freedom that only silence can provide. Rebellion doesn't always make noise. It might be so quiet that it makes the air around you feel strange. Sometimes the best way to rebel is not to raise your voice. Rebellion is when the world wants you to explain yourself, and you don't. If someone charges you and you don't apologize, defend yourself, or even acknowledge it, that is rebellion. It is a reluctance to give in to the ritual of weakness. People are scared of this revolt because it goes against the unspoken agreement that society has with you. To be free, you must first face the hard truth. You don't owe anyone an explanation. Not for the decisions you make, not for your quietness, not even for the things you did wrong. As soon as you understand this, you are on your way to becoming free. But that step is not easy, since everything inside you will fight against it. Your body will want to defend itself, your tongue will want to explain, and your intellect will want to be right. To rebel, you have to learn to control the storm inside you and allow the silence stay. How do you accomplish this? The first adjustment is in your mind. You need to change how you think about silence. For most people, silence means being weak. Being quiet means you're guilty. Not saying anything means giving up. But in reality, silence means power. Silence means something is unknown. Being quiet means being in charge. Think about the courtroom again. The defendant who answers every inquiry seems desperate, whereas the one who doesn't answer shakes the whole system. Why? Because silence puts the blame back on the person who made the accusation. It says softly, "You are not worth my words." Think about history. Many people, including politicians, rivals, and philosophers, accused Marcus Aurelius, the emperor of Rome, but he didn't often speak up for himself in public. His silence did not make him weak, it made him live on forever. Machiavelli saw this and turned it into a rule of power. The less you say, the more people think you have nothing to fear. And what is power if not the ability to stay still when others want you to move? But rebellion isn't just about not defending. It is about developing a state of being that makes defense unnecessary. Think of Nietzsche's Übermensch, which means higher man. This is a person who makes their own values and stands above what others think. To be free, you need to become this archetype. Not arrogant, but untouchable. Not loud, yet strong. Your rebellion isn't to dispute, it's to live so fully in your own world that other people's judgments wash over you like waves against stone. Now, this doesn't imply you never talk. Rebellion is not just being quiet for the sake of being quiet. It is the refusal to get caught up in the defensive frame. You can choose to talk, but when you do, it's on your own terms. You can clarify, you can assert, but you can never defend. Because defense is a response, and response is giving in. To rebel means to do things just because you want to, not because you're afraid. But what does this look like in real life? Imagine a place of work where people talk behind each other's backs. Someone is telling lies about you. The instinct is to get people on your side, explain yourself, and clear the air. The rebel, on the other hand, accomplishes nothing. They keep working, moving, and living without giving a single reason. And slowly, something amazing happens. The person who accused you appears desperate, the chatter loses its strength, and the quiet becomes strong. People who thought you would protect are now upset. They start to question why he doesn't care. What does he know that we don't? Without your defense, they are no longer sure of themselves. Or think about a fight with someone. Someone you care about is falsely accusing you. Instead of defending yourself, you stay cool and quiet, or you say something that closes the conversation. Believe what you want. That's all. That phrase is a sign of rebellion. It breaks the chain of explanation, shifts the weight, and makes the accuser unstable. You don't offer them anything to eat, and they die in that empty space. You also need to be strong to rebel. You will be put to the test. People will push you harder if you don't fight back, because they want to see how you react. They aim to pull you back into the old routine, and this is where most people break down. They can handle stillness for a short time, but not for days or weeks. To really rebel, you need to be able to be quiet and let accusations die down on their own, because they always do. A fire can't burn without fuel. But the most serious revolt is not against others, it is against oneself. It is going against your own fear. It is not only refusing to explain yourself to others, but also to yourself. How often do you repeat talks in your brain and make excuses for what you said, even when no one is listening? How frequently do you protect yourself in your own mind from made-up critics? This is the secret prison. The revolt is meant to end this. Stop defending yourself to yourself, to accept that your decisions don't need to be tested, that your being doesn't need to be judged, and that your existence doesn't need to be defended. So, breaking free is a process of forgetting what you know. You stop using the instinct that helps you survive. You stop explaining things to people. You forget the inner courthouse of shame. And by unlearning, you enter something radical, the capacity of existing without apology. Those that learn how to do this rebellion become quite attractive. People can tell that there is something special about them, an authority that doesn't change. People are afraid of them, admire them, and occasionally detest them. But they never ignore them. And this magnetism doesn't come from being aggressive or using force. It comes from not having any defense. It comes from someone who is calm and doesn't need to prove, explain, or justify. But don't get me wrong, this disobedience cuts you off from others. Few people can grasp it because few people can handle it. The group stays together by explaining things to one another, saying sorry, clearing things up, and defending each other. To break that loop means to become an outsider. But here's the paradox. You can only be genuinely sovereign when you are an outsider. You can only taste freedom when you revolt. So the question is, will you keep bowing, defending, and living as a defendant in a trial that never ends? Or will you fight back with silence instead of fists or words? If you choose to rebel, get ready for the end. You don't just get stillness when you quit defending yourself. You get something far bigger. You learn the most shocking and profound truth about power, perception, and life itself. And that's where we need to go next. A truth exists that is so disturbing that the majority will flee from it. A truth that Machiavelli, Nietzsche, and Jung all talked about but never really said. You don't have to defend yourself since there is nothing to protect. Take a moment to think about that. The whole point of defense is based on a false idea that your reputation, identity, and self-worth are weak things that need to be safeguarded at all costs. But the real fact is that these things only exist in other people's thoughts and in your readiness to believe what they say. You break the illusion the instant you refuse to protect yourself. You learn that you are not a prisoner of your thoughts. You are the one who builds them. This is why the most powerful people in history never had to defend themselves. They didn't waste their time explaining anything. They knew that presence, not defense, controls perception. And presence comes from silence, stillness, and not giving in to the need for justification. Machiavelli said this in The Prince. Leaders who explain too much make people suspicious, but leaders who don't explain anything become legends. Nietzsche made it even clearer. The Übermensch doesn't have to defend himself to the herd because his will makes its own rule. Jung also pointed to the same truth inside. The self that accepts its shadow no longer fears being accused, since it no longer fears itself. The ultimate revelation is this: when you stop defending, you're not at war with anyone else anymore, not even yourself. You go past remorse, humiliation, and the endless struggle of living. You are sovereign not because people agree with you, but because you no longer need their consent. This is not being arrogant, it's being free. Still, arrogance is a defense and an overreaction to feeling insecure. Freedom is quieter. It doesn't need to say anything or prove anything. It just is. But this truth is scary because it makes you think about how much time you've wasted in a trial that never existed. Think about how long you spent explaining, clarifying, proving, and practicing your defenses in your head. It was all a show for people who weren't really watching. And even if they were, you were never responsible for their judgment. What does it mean to live outside of defense? It means you don't talk about your goals, you go for them. You don't explain why you made a choice, you live it. It indicates you don't back down when someone accuses you, you let it go. And yet, the less you defend, the stronger you get. People detect something unusual and almost inhuman in you, the ability to stand without permission. And that scares them. It completely changes who has the most power. You become untouchable, not because you can't be hurt, but because attacks can't hold you down. Think of a mirror as a metaphor. People in the world are like stones, ready to throw accusations. Most people are like glass. They are weak and break when hit, and they try to fix themselves with explanations. But the person who has accepted this truth is like a mirror. If you throw a stone at it, it will bounce back. The mirror doesn't protect anyone. It just displays the person who is accusing. This is why people are afraid of silence. It says more about the accuser than it does about you. But here is the ultimate paradox. To get to this point, you have to let go of the part of you that still wants to be defended. That scared youngster, who had been taught to grovel for acceptance, has to be buried. And in its place, a new self is born. A self that doesn't need to say sorry, explain itself, or be afraid. This is not an easy road. You will lose the feeling of belonging. It will take away the false sense of safety that comes from always being validated. People who don't understand will think you're cold, heartless, or even dangerous. But in return, it will give you something much better. Freedom. The kind of freedom that Machiavelli talked about, the kind that Nietzsche wanted, and the kind that Jung told you to embrace when he told you to embrace the entirety of your shadow. And once you have tasted it, you can't go back. You will see the game for what it is. A theater of unending defenses, a carousel of explanations, and a jail that looks like morality. And you won't play anymore. The truth is that you don't need to be defended because you don't need to be proven. You are not a defendant. You are the judge, the ruler, and the sovereign of your own life. You leave the courtroom completely as soon as you cease defending. And the people who keep accusing you appear like kids throwing rocks at a mountain. So now the question is, will you stay safe in your defense? Or will you dare to go into the flames of silence? Will you keep begging for permission to live? Or will you live without asking for it? You can choose, but keep this in mind. History doesn't remember those who fought back. It commemorates those who stood firm, wouldn't explain, and let their silence speak more than any words could. In the end, defending yourself is like dying 1,000 times. Not defending is like being born again. The regenerated self or sovereign self no longer begs, justifies, or bows. It just stands there. And the world transforms when you stand like this. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. Let the last words stay with you, like an echo you can't get away from. Don't ever defend yourself, not because you have to win the debate, but because the argument itself was a trap. If you break free, you'll understand what Machiavelli knew, what Nietzsche warned, and what Jung whispered. Genuine power doesn't explain itself. It just is.